we live, Jez? Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is the Xbox 2+1. I believe it's episode 17, although I'm not really sure. I'm one of your hosts, Randall Thor 19, man with a million. With me, as always, we have managing editor, double agent of chaos, Jez Corden. What's going on? Indeed. Yeah, the drama just keeps on continuing and building up, and yeah. But joining us, we have the illustrious, another double agent of chaos. We have Jeff Grubb, Giant Bomb, here with us as well. Thank you, Jeff, for giving us your insight today on everything going around in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Howdy, boys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. We had you on last year, and I thought it would be very interesting to get your perspective of like how you felt last year regarding certain things and how you feel regarding certain things now. Like last year, you were pretty positive about Xbox, about
That sounds right. Yeah.
the path they were going down, and I know you were looking forward to Starfield, which I'm pretty sure didn't exactly hit all the notes for you, right?
Yeah, it's a game I enjoyed, and it's a game I wish was better in a lot of ways. Yes.
Yes. Are you at all looking forward to the update that's supposed to be coming like this week?
It's like a 10% looking forward to. I actually did a poll for Game Mess Mornings where it's like I asked people like, is this the update's going to get you back, or do you need a lot more updates, or you're never going back? And I'm not in the I'm never going back to that game camp, but I am waiting to see what happens with this update, but I will probably return after several updates if it gets several updates.
So would it be one of those things where, just like me, you'll go back to play Starfield when there's like the new expansion that's supposedly coming out around September?
Not
That's
necessarily.
when I would revisit the game.
I'm the disgusting, filthy PC gamer, so I'm give me like the mods. If there's like an interesting mod, that's what would get me back more than anything.
Okay, so there hasn't really been any cool mods?
There's been some, but it's nothing that's like, there's lots of cool mods for lots of things. Nothing that's standing out for Starfield to like, oh, this is the reason I got to go back to it.
Okay, fair enough. So, well, now a year later, you're here. We could talk about a lot of stuff about, Summer Games Fest, Xbox's showcase, and PlayStation, and everything that's going on here. But I guess the big question we have to ask off the front is, how has your feelings toward Xbox changed in the past year or so? Are you more interested in what they're doing, or are you less interested? Are you just one of those people that are just like, hey man, screw Xbox, they don't know what they're doing? Like, what has changed in the past year for you?
Yeah, I think what's changed is there's a couple things. I think last year, a lot of my good vibes around Xbox were based on some assumptions that did not turn out to be the case. It's like I was under the assumption that, yeah, they know they want those 2 billion gamers out there. Yeah, but they also know that is a long-term prospect. So in the meantime, the safest bet that they can make is to continue investing in the Xbox console brand as hard as possible, so that that can really help them bridge that gap, because that's going to take a long time. And I think the other thing is that they have like lost the plot. They've lost the narrative. And that might sound like the kind of thing that we say on Twitter, oh, the narrative has turned or something like that. But it's actually so much more important than that. Xbox doesn't exist, right? Xbox isn't a real thing. It's a story we tell. It's a brand. They tell us this thing. Hey, here's Xbox. Here's what it is. Here's what we're doing. And we all agreed, like, yeah. And the reason we agree to that is usually because we like the story and we can buy in on it and believe in it. And now it's like the pillars that hold up a narrative like that hold up that story of the console is worth it because of this, and those games are the big reason, and there's more of those games coming, and you can only have these experiences here or whatever. However they want to frame that stuff is like more and more questions butt up around those pillars, to the point where it's like, how do I feel about this? And really, is this something I should be spending my time thinking about or investing in? And once that starts happening, it starts to spiral, and people start asking more questions, and then they turn away and no longer want to invest in Xbox. Now, that's not across the board. I just think this is like one of the things that's happening with a lot of people right now. And they spent years building up the plot of what is Xbox and why does it matter. And it feels like it's gotten out of control from them, and they can't stop the bleeding there. And that is going to be something that's very difficult to fix. So I personally am at a point where I play mostly on my PC, Steam Deck, Switch, but I enjoy using my Xbox. I got on the other day and was playing on there. I'm like, this is a good piece of hardware. And then my next thought was, and that matters to almost nobody. Having good hardware, having a fun device to use is great in the moment, but it's not the story that we tell. It's the story we tell is the reason there's list wars on Twitter and forums and all these things is because that's an easy story to build your identity around. And actually enjoying sitting down playing a game on a device, no one cares. And so to be in a situation where it's like they have fun hardware to use that I think is really solid, and that doesn't matter because everything else around the brand is sort of on fire in a variety of ways. That's a tough nut to crack, and they're going to have to like step back and decide like what is the story we're telling. And I think we're in the process of them still figuring that out, let alone them deciding exactly how they're going to come out and tell that story.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, isn't there? Well, what do you think? What do you think was the first domino for fall for you in that aspect? Was it the rumors of them potentially exploring putting games on other platforms? Is it like the recent layoffs? I mean, they've done layoffs in like March where they laid off 1,900 people, the ABK stuff, and then most recently, and the one maybe that hurt the most, is they shut down 3 studios and folded one into like, is it kind of just seem that Xbox kind of can't stop stepping on rakes that are set in front of them and really setting the narrative to people that care that like it's kind of out of control?
Yeah, that's, I mean, all those, yes, the rakes, the constant rake stepping is definitely something that makes you wonder like what is going on over there. But I think it cracked for me at first in a really significant, noticeable way with like Hi-Fi Rush, because I had that report. Hi-Fi Rush didn't sell what it needed to sell. Whatever the actual wording that I settled on is like it costs so much, and then it made a line that was significantly below there. And my thought was, well, yeah, you put it on Game Pass. We all know that's how it's going to go. I know like the wording early on was, hey, Game Pass gets people to buy more games. No one ever said like it was like going to get you to buy more games of the games that are on Game Pass. They were talking about some network effect. But it's like, so all along, I thought we knew what was happening here, that you would have Game Pass. These games would go on there. People would subscribe to Game Pass to get access to those games. And in the meantime, you would need to be building games that attract the next crop of players. And that's how it's going to go. So this enables you to keep making smaller games, a variety of different games, and then there's the tent poles that are going to hold everything up. And when the tent poles didn't necessarily do their job, I think like, I'm definitely talking about Starfield here. And it's like, oh boy, okay, so now what's next? And I think they looked around internally and they're like, we don't believe in anything the way we thought we believed in Starfield. So everything is sort of a question mark now, because Game Pass has reached the number of people that basically can get that want Game Pass. They have it. And so like it's this huge uphill climb, and really it's a wall that they need to get over. And there's no telling like what is going to be the game that serves as the ladder to sort of boost them up over that wall. And right now there's no obvious answer there, especially since Call of Duty is going to continue to be multi-platform and all this stuff like that. That'll help Game Pass a little bit, I think. It'll probably have a significant impact actually, but you can't just rely on Call of Duty. There's got to be some other stuff coming internally that makes Game Pass feel like a good story to tell once again. And I think, kind of going all the way back to Hi-Fi Rush and seeing how that played out all the way through them closing that studio, it was like, okay, I thought we were doing one thing, and now here we are back in this world where all these studios are kind of fighting for themselves, and they have to fend for themselves. And the overall strategy that was going to be there to protect these studios didn't actually exist. And so what was the point of all this is kind of what I'm left with. So yeah, it like starts way back then, and it sort of gets an exclamation point in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to use the word vindicated in this situation, considering like what happened, but you definitely took a lot of crap for your reporting about Hi-Fi Rush.
Right, and I definitely don't. I'm not running victory laps. That's for sure. That's not what I'm doing here.
Yeah. But I mean, it definitely points like a picture of like, hey, okay, Aaron Greenberg says it passed all their metrics and it was this big thing, and now you get rid of the studio. Um, what do you? I guess I'll ask like about the studio closures, because for a lot of people it seems like this was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people will be like, well, I can't accept games going to other platforms, right?
Sure.
And I'm not going to say, hey, if you don't like that, then you don't like that, whatever. But it really did seem for a lot of people, even a lot of people in the media, that like shutting down Tango and Austin, Arcane Austin, was like the last step, or the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you think there's anything more? Like, I know there's a discussion between people have of like, hey, Game Pass is the fault of this because Hi-Fi Rush didn't sell well or didn't move the Game Pass needle, right? We need to close the studio down. Same thing with like Redfall. Do you think there's more to it than that? Like, was this strictly game didn't meet its revenue potential, so we gotta end it? Or do you think there's more behind the scenes where it's just like, hey, you know what? We were told to find more money in the budget, and we just happened to close some studios that had just shipped games. It's kind of maybe like wrong place, wrong time. Maybe the Fallout stuff. Because Jez sort of has a conspiracy theory that he thinks this is all related to Fallout.
Conspiracy theory?
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, you can take what Matt Booty said in his emails, right? Where he said that they wanted to move resources around because, you know, they were kind of spread too thin. And even the Jill Braff said that, like, hey, we were about to topple over, all that sort of stuff. And that they wanted to focus on the bigger titles that Bethesda was kind of, you know, going to make. You know, Jez thinks the layoffs or the closures there are all related to Fallout. Like, they were caught off guard by Fallout. And they wanted to. Well, Jez, you tell it then, I guess. What you think this is all about?
Well, I had theories that, like, Tango being where it is and I was muted at the start of the show, and it should be fixed now. Sorry about that, guys. I had a theory that, like, and it's kind of hinted to me by a couple of people that one of the issues that Microsoft had with the Tango aspect of the business, and it was less to do with Hi-Fi Rush and more to do with their geographical location, the time zones, inability to integrate with other teams, like the fact that Ninja Theory can support other studios while they're incubating a project, or the Coalition can, or Undead Labs can, and they can all help each other out, like Machine Games worked on Starfield.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of hinted to me that Tango wasn't able to contribute meaningfully there because of their geographical location. So like when they're incubating the next game, it's like there's a whole portion of the team that is either potentially contracted and then furloughed or laid off even, because otherwise they'll be sitting around twiddling their thumbs effectively. And someone, you know, who's previously familiar with Microsoft's sort of like their way of doing things, or the way publishers are sort of, you know, doing co-development and everything. Like Toys for Bob was on Call of Duty, for example, or parts of the studio was. So it's kind of hinted to me that like Tango might have been a casualty of this, and with costs shrinking, or costs growing rather, Tango was like the studio that was the one that was least able to bring value to the overall proposition, which is why like a lot of people said like a Ninja Theory's going to be next on the chopping block because they only make Hellblade, right? But then like, you know, Ninja Theory has a state-of-the-art motion capture facility which other studios in the UK can use, you know, to get value out of them that way. So like I wondered if you'd heard anything, but like that it wasn't just Hi-Fi Rush didn't sell, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think that is all step two, right? I think you're right that is stuff worth diagnosing as part of like the symptoms that are part of the sickness, where we are needing to cut costs. And that means being more efficient and using what we have more resourcefully, and all that stuff is definitely part of it. But I think, you know, the way it was explained to me was, you know, what's the cardinal sin here? If these studios were making Microsoft money, they would not be closed. Like that's the first part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that so it's like we'll start there, and that I think that is not necessarily as simple as, you know, Hi-Fi Rush didn't sell, but I think that is still the biggest portion of that step. And then I think Microsoft wasn't just like, well, that's, you know, look at our ledger, they're in the red, get rid of them. I think they do have a moment where they're like, okay, we have all these studios, we did make these investments, what can we do to make this make sense? And I think there's a process there to figure that all out. And I think you're right. That at a certain point, they're like, okay, this studio can provide this and that, and they can help out these other studios and contribute into these other projects. And that makes them make sense in between their big projects. Yes. But again, just to reiterate, if Tango Gameworks, if these studios were making Microsoft money, they would not be closing.
Doubtless.
And does that worry you for what Xbox is doing? That like you have to make Microsoft money,
Yes.
so therefore like it has to be the Dooms or the Halos or the CODs and stuff. Does that seem like a change?
Yeah, like I said, it's not what I thought we were doing here. I thought like, I mean, I get it from the beginning. They've never said anything other than this. I always go back to this anecdote of what's his name from the CFD from Rare, Joe
Neat.
Yeah, Joe Neat. I remember talking to him when the year Sea of Thieves was launching, and I was like, "Hey, cool. This seems like a cool game, and you're launching in Game Pass, so it's like, you know, as long as Game Pass is doing well, you're doing well." And he told me just straight up, "He's like, no, we got to make money. We have our own profit and loss sheet." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Okay." So I've known for forever that's how it's gone, and yeah, that was reiterated a bunch of times to me. But I still thought there was like. This would enable Microsoft to be more creative because they were going for the larger overarching service. And so this would provide more of a buffer. And I think what the reality here is it probably did. It probably is providing more of a buffer. It's just not an infinite buffer. And so now here we are at where some of these studios are, it's like, well, the rubber does have to eventually meet the road. And we are looking at these studios that aren't making us money and do not promise to make us money for the next 5 years, at least until their next project is done. And in the meantime, they would be costing us a lot of money. It's all... You know, it's very black and white at a certain point. And I just thought we were in a situation where Microsoft would have a little bit longer of a leash than it did here to let these studios cook and try a couple more times. And, you know, and specifically with Tango, it's, you know, you had Hi-Fi Rush. You build on that. Hi-Fi Rush 2, make it bigger, better. Take that technology, try it again with some other stuff, and let people get excited about the next one and build on that. And that's what I thought we were doing. So yes, I'm worried because it's clearly not. It's clearly now turning toward, it's got to be the big games again. And that has not necessarily worked either. That hasn't worked for what feels like a decade and a half for Xbox.
All right. I guess the other big question in regards to this, do you think Tango would still be around if they never acquired ABK?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe, but probably they would still be around. But you know, those hypotheticals are so tough. It's like people also point out, and I agree with this, that these studios likely would have been closed had Microsoft never acquired Bethesda or ZeniMax. Where it's like these studios were heading towards closure anyhow. At a certain point, it's like, okay, so what? They did make these acquisitions. They do take responsibility for these studios. When they make money, they would take those profits. So when they make the decisions to close these, they own those. Who cares what would have or could have happened? But clearly, the as everyone keeps saying, the Eye of Sauron has turned onto Xbox in a way it had not before, and that makes a ton of sense. With, you know, I think people are always like, they got to start making their money back from that $69 billion, and it's like, well, you know, Call of Duty is going to make them way more than they were going to make from you know, low interest rates or whatever from putting that money into a savings account. So they're probably happy with that side of things, of how the money's like working for them in the way it wasn't before. But that still is now a much larger investment than it was before. And so they are going to be paying attention to the Xbox ecosystem the way they weren't before. And I think in that situation, I think Phil and his team puts pressure on themselves to deliver. And I don't think this is like coming down from Satya Nadella, like, hey, you just bought Activision, close some studios for me. That's not how it happens. It's just, hey, Phil, how's it going over at Xbox? And then Phil has to like kind of have a come to Jesus moment and be honest and be like, okay, I think we need to get a little bit harsh with ourselves here and make some cuts. And here we are.
Yeah, in my mind, it's Satya's being like, "Hey, everybody loves this Fallout TV show. When's the next Fallout game?" Well, Satya, Todd doesn't like people playing with his toys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, I don't like that answer. Why don't you spin up a studio for Fallout stuff? Well, can we get more money to do that? No, why don't you
No.
go get the money from the within the budget that we already have given you? Oh man, okay. Well, I need to go back and cut some studios then.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, they said as much, right? They're going to focus on bigger games. That's what Matt Booty said. High impact games. What would be a more high impact game right now than Fallout?
Yeah. I mean, even if you were to start making a Fallout game now, it's like,
Oh, sure, yeah.
wouldn't you be able to get it out maybe 5 years, 6 years from
I mean,
now?
it still launches into a world that has a much larger understanding of Fallout than it would before, but
true.
it's not capitalizing the way it would if it was like in the next year or two, obviously.
Did you check out the Fallout TV show at all?
I did. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I'm run pretty hot and cold on TV shows in general, but I enjoyed my time with that. I thought they did a really good job.
I was surprised by how good it was.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I was surprised at how well it did for me.
Like, I always felt like it. Go ahead, Jez. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it is, for me, the Fallout TV show has triggered this hyper fixation on all things Fallout. I don't know why I get like this, but like after watching the show, I'm like, okay, what Fallout game am I playing today? What Fallout merch am I looking to buy? And I just wonder how many other people are like this, like weird like me. But...
I think it's a lot. I think that's definitely what we saw, and that's why so many people rush to go play the games. And this is the power of this synergy actually working for them. They could do this. They could repeat this. They just have to make sure the show is actually good.
Yeah, I think that's what separates it from like something like Halo TV show,
clearly.
Which didn't, nobody really cared. Well, I mean, I know the fans cared, but a lot of the fans were upset with what. The lore,
and it's clearly a different situation. Clearly, Halo did not do what Fallout did.
You have Last of Us, which did really well, and I kind of look at it as like Last of Us is like the retelling of the first game, which was really good because the first game is basically a movie, anyways. And then you have this Fallout game, but it's like it's not based on any of the games. It's its own thing.
It's like
but it's within the lore.
Yeah, it's within the lore.
It's part of the games, and it's telling a different story. And like they completely nailed every aspect of it. Like I was sitting there, I was like, "This is gonna be. They can't make a Fallout TV show. Come on, right?" And then it's like, "Oh my god, they really did, and they nailed every aspect of it." Like, wow, okay. Like I guess you got to believe in Jonathan Nolan, I suppose. The Westworld stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's done some good stuff in the past, and I still was just like, they might make a show that's a good show. I don't know if it'll be a good Fallout show. And I mean, if anything, it's exactly that. It's a good Fallout show. It really is just steeped in that stuff.
Yeah, I know it reached the mainstream because my sister started watching it and they loved it. They were texting me about it. And I'm like, okay, well, this has reached a different level. If my family members are like, oh, you hear about this Fallout show? Yep. It's a video game thing because I'm a video, I'm the video game person. Guy, I was like, have you heard about this? Like, yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah, it's really good. You should watch it. It's
fun though. It was really it was what's good about that show. There's a lot of shows that I like better than Fallout. I would probably recommend Fallout to more people than I would any of those other shows because it's like, it's going to be a crowd pleaser. You're going to have a good time with that. And, it's gory and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And then when it does, it's really good at that too. It's a good time.
Do you think we'll see more of this synergy of trying to reach out to the TV audience or the movie audience to get more eyes on a product?
Oh, yes.
You think so? Yeah. You think more than like what we currently are? Because I know there's like a God of War show coming, and a Horizon show coming, and a Grounded show coming, and a Gears of War TV show, and I think an animated series coming.
And there's going to be so many more. It's like, what is it? It's the one reliable, repeatedly proven. If you can make a good show, repeatedly proven way to get a wider audience into a game. And that is something they have struggled with over and over again. I think the thing we keep hearing is, hey, we're looking for growth and we don't know where it's going to come from. And so we're trying all these different things, trying to get growth. And we're, for a while there, it's like, hey, it's Game Pass and it's going to be available wherever you are. And people were mostly like, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to keep playing Genshin Impact. I'm good. But you create this sort of must participate movement because of a TV show that people are all watching. You like mimic a little bit of what was once the monoculture, and you get what happened to The Witcher on Netflix, where people watched that show and they rushed to go play the game, and it had its second best sales year since it launched. You know, the same thing with The Last of Us, same thing with this.
Cyberpunk had that.
Cyberpunk, obviously doesn't happen with every single instance, but nothing has a 100% hit rate, whatever. This is proving to be like a really good way to build the brand of your video games and sell a lot of video games. And so when they have that card to play, they're going to keep playing it until it completely fails them over and over and over again. Because really, what other options do they have for reliable growth? There's not a lot of great options on the table. Everything they've tried and it has kind of not, if not backfired, just fizzled out. And it's like, okay, I guess we're still selling the same games to the same people who've been buying them for the last 10 years. So I guess that means we're going to get a better average return per user. We got to get more average revenue per user. That means higher prices for subscriptions, higher prices for games, more microtransactions, more DLC, more just taking more money from us, the suckers, because we're going to show up no matter what. And so it's like, man, if we could alleviate some of that pressure, or do that and also get more people into the ecosystem, which is actually what they're going for.
Is there any particular franchise you would like to see into a TV show?
Whenever I hear the idea, I'm usually pretty skeptical. And really the ones that I would want are stuff like Castlevania, which already got a really good show on Netflix.
It was really good, yeah.
Yes, and I'm like excited that they're really doubling down on that.
I know, no game to tie it into though. But
no, exactly right. And that's really, I guess, what I'm thinking of is I wish they would have a game to tie into that. That would be nice.
I was so skeptical of Fallout TV show. Like I am a big Fallout fan, like of the games, but I was just like, there's just after the Halo TV show, I was just like, there's no way that can pull this off, you know. And I just didn't think it would have the budget or the know-how. I even feel like this probably wasn't such a huge budget thing. It was just the writers knew Fallout, and Todd was involved, and they led the game, and oh god, they just nailed it so much. I'm
but Jonathan Nolan's partner, I can't remember his name, but the actual showrunner is apparently a huge Fallout fan, and it shows.
Yeah, definitely shows.
It sure does. Isn't the Legend of Zelda movies coming at some point, right?
Yeah, Wes Ball, the director of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which just came out this past week. He's directing. He's been talking up a big game. I still am like, we'll see, bud. This is who's making the Zelda movie, right? You know which company is producing it?
No. Which company is DreamWorks?
Sony is making Zelda now.
Okay.
That's always a fun one. Yeah, so Sony weird. Pictures is producing that film. I believe that's right. It's not Illumination, which did the Mario movie, did the animated one. This is a live action Zelda movie from Sony, from director Wes Ball.
So not animated like the Mario movie?
Right. Not animated like a Hayao Miyazaki movie, which is what everyone wants. It's like, just make it anime.
Who are they going to get to play Link?
Yeah, it's a good question. Although there was an interesting little tidbit about that. We were going to talk about this on Last of the Nintendogs Tonight plug. There is an actor in Planet of the Apes who is a relatively young guy. Like he's in his 20s-ish, like maybe late 20s at the oldest. And Wes Ball goes up to him. He's like, man, it's too bad you're not younger, or else you'd be able to play Link in the upcoming Zelda movie that I'm directing. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's going to be probably a noticeably younger Link, which, we have in the games very frequently. But yeah, I guess so at the oldest, expect a teenage Link in there. And okay, that's going to, what if it's like, an 8-year-old Link? What if it's, they
go like really
Anakin Skywalker and Phantom Menace Link. Yeah, that one, we'll see.
For whatever reason in my head, I'm like, they're going to go, if it's Sony producing it or whatever, I'm like, Tom Holland,
I would,
Mr. Drake, Uncharted.
I think he would do a good job. It's going to be really hard to transition the tone of Zelda into a movie with like a script and the actor talking a lot. People are going to have an idea of what he should sound like in their head, and it's going to be difficult to pull that off. But everyone was pretty okay with Chris Pratt in the end, and myself included, for Mario. So what do I know?
Yeah, everybody did ride Chris pretty hard about all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess let's I know. I want to talk a little bit to you about the other aspect that we kind of mentioned before about the Xbox's multi-platform approach, or even like sort of seems everybody's kind of looking to uh more places like
Yeah, they
Sony.
have to.
I guess I'll ask you, do you think Sony, there's been a lot of back and forth about will they, won't they, Sony doing day one games on PC for their single player experiences. Like there's financials were today, and you can make the numbers say whatever. Like the forward looking stuff is that they weren't great because they were down 30%, but then like the whole year was like best year ever. But like moving forward, it seems like they expect a decline.
Yeah, I mean, I could translate that a little bit too. What happened is the PS5 sold really well, and yet it's still lagging behind the PS4. And that is like when we're well beyond the problems of the limited supply. So what Sony is saying to investors is, despite everything we tried, which if people are paying attention, for the last year and a half plus included significant price cuts to the PS5 in most major territories for months at a time, despite all those efforts, we're not going to sell more PS5s than we sold PS4, at least not anytime soon. Maybe later in the generation, but what they're telling investors is, in the meantime, we don't expect that to happen anytime soon. So if you're looking for the growth by finding new gamers, that's not happening for the PlayStation 5. So what we're doing is finding more ways to make more money from the same people, and then maybe taking our games to other places, because that will be growth. Because guess what? Helldivers 2, the fastest selling Sony release ever. So,
which nobody expected at all.
No,
Like,
I thought that game was going to be a lot of fun. That's all my expectations were.
But nobody expected that game to, I don't even know, sell 5 million copies. And here you are being like the fastest selling PlayStation game of all time, thanks in part to PC. Because obviously, if it was just a PlayStation exclusive, the numbers would have been drastically reduced.
Oh, yeah.
So I would imagine they're looking at Helldivers and they're like, the return on investment on this is probably ridiculous in comparison to something like Spider-Man 2, which had a ridiculous budget, but then also they had to pay stuff to Marvel for licensing fees.
Correct.
I guess so. Where do you stand on? Okay, we're gonna do day and date on PC for multiplayer games like Concord, Helldivers, which seems like they're gonna be doing. But do you also feel like eventually they'll just say, all right, we're day and date on PC, starting for our single player games like with Death Stranding 2, Ghost 2, and we're just fully embrace PC? Do you think that's a thing that happens? Because I know a lot of people have been talking about it with the way Sony's been courting PC and how they need the extra revenue because their margins are a little bit thinner than they would want. What's your position on that?
Yeah, I'm at a point where I look around and be like, well, why wouldn't they? Because, and I say that because, and I'm sure people have their answers there, but like, just bear with me. There was a time when you couldn't do that because you were in the battle with Xbox. And now it feels like, well, that battle's over, or at least decided in many ways. Xbox has said explicitly they're moving on from it. They're not looking to fight that battle. And they've said it repeatedly because we keep wondering why they're not fighting it. And they're like, well, we told you, we're done. So if you're Sony, why keep pretending that you're fighting that battle? You won. So what does a winner do? They get to decide the terms of how things work going forward. And you would just say, hey, listen, we love our PlayStation gamers. We promise to keep giving you guys awesome games. But we're going to put this on PC. And if you want to keep playing on PlayStation, fine. If you want to play on PC, that's fine. Maybe they put it on their store day and date, and then it comes to Steam later. That's definitely something like Ubisoft keeps trying to do here and there for some of its games.
But it kind of seems like they fail though at it, doesn't it?
Well, no, Ubisoft. No, okay, yes, Ubisoft has definitely failed at trying to keep their games off of Steam entirely, but they still keep doing the thing where it's like, well, it'll be on Ubisoft Plus, whatever it's called, for 6 months, a year, and then eventually it will launch on Steam. Yeah, listen, I don't think that is like a winning strategy in and of itself, for sure. You got to be on Steam in some way. But at least to to dip their toe in, I could see them being like, well, here's a PlayStation Store on PC. Yeah, it's definitely going to come to Steam eventually, but if you want to buy it now on PC, you got to come to us so we get that 100% of the sales. I think we head in that direction because again, I don't see the argument against it anymore. People are gonna get like there's a console audience out there. There's people who were Xbox, now they're PSN or they're PlayStation. Like that, they're not like oh, and now I'm gonna go play on PC. There are people who just want to play on console, and PlayStation has been able to establish themselves as the default choice in a really unequivocal way. There is sort of no argument there anymore. So if you're going to play on console, they're pretty safe that you're in the assumption that you're going to play on PlayStation. So they're good. And then if you aren't going to play on console, well, they still want your money. So I think they head in this direction. At the very least, the window is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Maybe it never actually shrinks to zero, but why wouldn't it? Again, I just don't see the argument.
Well, let me
because right now go ahead, Jez.
I was going to say, let me put this question to you because our good buddy Special Nick put it out there that Microsoft and Sony were in very early preliminary talks to bring Helldivers to Xbox. Do you think that's like, given the fact that PlayStation is the default now, like, beyond most of the argument, do you think Sony goes that far with it to bring some of their service games to Xbox, or do we think that's just pie in the sky dreaming?
I mean, to me, that's still like, hey, we won behavior. Yeah, we'll bring a game to Xbox. We're not worried about you anymore. And I think on top of that, it's the one game that they know would do very well on Xbox. That game would actually still make a ton of money on Xbox, regardless of what people say about, the console, the consoles aren't selling very well. There's still a lot of Xboxes out there, relatively speaking, and a lot of those gamers would jive with Helldivers 2 a lot. So I think it makes a lot of sense on those terms. And I don't think it really says anything bad about the rest of Sony's strategy other than they like money and they'll take your money too. So I think they would go that far, but I'm not like, this is not like a broad plan. I think it's a Helldivers 2 plan. This is a special case. And I think that's how it would get treated if it does come to Xbox, which is something I think we've heard a couple times. I know Nick started that. And since then I've heard it repeated. Don't know if it's actually going to happen. Again, those are conversations. Those conversations happen all the time.
Yeah. I mean, because look how well Sea of Thieves is doing on PlayStation right now.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, you could have that with Helldivers over on Xbox if you wanted to.
I mean, at a certain point, it's like live service is, you got to be everywhere. Like if you're running a live service game, you kind of have to be every single place. Eventually Helldivers 2 probably it shows up in an Apple presentation 2 years from now and like, hey, it's now on, your iPhone 17. So yeah, you got to be everywhere. And I don't think it hurts Sony if Helldivers 2 shows up on Xbox.
Yeah. I wonder if there's still people within PlayStation, or maybe they're retired out now, like the Jim Ryans or whatever, that are like, no, we need to make sure that everything feeds the console, which is why we're not going to do PC day one, because it's going to affect console sales, and this is our North Star.
Well, they've done that, right? I think that the argument should be that, when I talk to like sort of PlayStation leaning people on their podcast, they're always just like, they list a litany of problems with Xbox. And then my question is always like, that PlayStation brings up those same problems all the time in every single one of their earnings calls. And like, they have had all the games that you keep saying you want Xbox to make. And PlayStation has been selling consoles and has focused on growing the console. And yet when they talk to their investors, they're afraid that they have no idea where the growth is going to come from. So I think when it comes back to like, okay, yeah, are they just going to keep worried about feeding the console? They've done that. And they've done it sort of flawlessly in a lot of ways. Maybe you can have some quibbles here or there. But compared to the competition, it seems like they've done everything right. And yet still they're in the same position. So why would they keep kidding themselves? At a certain point, you have to be like, we have to find the growth for somewhere. Like, as much as we treat these platforms as small little religions and they need to operate with a certain dogma, these companies will abandon that dogma in an instant if it means satisfying the investors. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, which brings us to Xbox and their multi-platform strategy, because it kind of fits into what you just mentioned, right? Like, all right, well, we want to reach these sort of things. I don't know if it's like, well, we're not doing as well as we thought we should be doing. Because I sort of feel like when they made the acquisition for ABK, Xbox was in a much different place, in 2021
Mhm.
than they're currently in 2024, right? Like hardware was selling better than PlayStation. Game Pass was growing like exponentially, right? And then it was like, okay, what are we doing? Like the pandemic was still around. People were playing in games and spending money like nuts. So it's like, yeah, you make that acquisition because Bobby Kotick ruined his company's reputation, and then it was within a price point you felt comfortable in, and you felt this would set you up. And here we are 3 years later, and it's like, well, the console's been declining for a while, and Game Pass stopped growing, and the deal took way longer to actually close than they thought, and all the new gamers they thought they'd get from the pandemic actually weren't real, and they all just went back to their normal lives and stopped
the reality
playing
is
video
a lot of them did
games.
stick around though. That's the weird part about all this is when you look at like the numbers year to year. Yeah, it's down a little bit, and like occasionally. Well, this year, like Matt Piscatella was expecting it to be down 2%. It wasn't down last year or the year before, coming out of the pandemic, and so that spending maintained. The problem is these companies all set targets and made investments based on a line going up far sharper than what it did. And now that we are at a year where things could recede, and obviously we're seeing that with console sales, they're 2 years in a row of 30% down quarter or year over year for the quarter. That really puts every bet you've made in a new light, and so it looks really bad. But it's like the industry's not crashing. I know people want to say it's a crash. That's not what's happening. There's a correction, and it's a correction because these companies made miscalculations, and so now we're all paying for their correction. But the people that are buying games are still buying just as many games as ever, if not more. And then that audience that did spend $500 or around that for a new console, they're picking up games here or there, at least, if not as frequently as they did during the pandemic, at least at some pace that is enabling us to keep a flat growth year to year at the very least. Now, obviously, you have to factor in inflation. That's going to make a flat growth look much worse, and it is. But that we're not talking about some crash here.
Right. But here we are with Microsoft with their 4 games put it on PlayStation. Seemed Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush didn't do very well. Looking at like player numbers or positions on store charts. And Sea of Thieves and Grounded seem like they're doing really well. Sea of Thieves seems like it's doing extraordinarily well. I think it was like the #1 most downloaded game on PlayStation in Europe and like 4 for the US. Of course, everybody asks what's next for Xbox, and Phil and the team, Matt and Sarah at that February thing said, "Oh no, this isn't a change in exclusive strategy, right? This is just 4 games, or don't begin to think that this is all the games coming to PlayStation." But I mean, I got to ask you, since you're clued in on things that are going on, doesn't this sort of feel like it will be everything eventually? Whether or not like it's going to be drip fed for a little bit, and then like everything is just like, we sort of need to do this for whatever reasons, whether this is mandated from the money men like the Tim Stewarts and the Amy Hoods, and or how do you feel that Xbox multi-platform push is going to go?
Yeah,
how deep will it be?
Right, it's a sort of thing where when people talk about like, hey, this is gonna be a weird analogy, but stick with me. When people talk about like evolution or like how can it be so perfect, this Earth we live on? It's like exactly the right distance from the sun, and we have water and all these things that we need. And it's like, well, yeah, at a certain point, like life just fills the gap that you give it. And it's gonna, like, if a puddle were to wake up suddenly and be like, oh my God, how is this puddle shaped or this hole shaped perfectly for me to be this shape? It's like, well, no, you're water. You just fill up the gaps that you're given. And I think what's going to happen with Xbox is they're doing all this because they're looking for growth. If they start getting growth from something, they're going to continue to fill up that gap like water does, like life does. And so by not like standing here and being like the strategy hasn't changed mostly. We're not everything is going to be going multi-platform. Yeah, I mean, I bet technically that's true, but you can't not take the growth that's there. And if growth isn't coming from your other strategies and it's coming from the multi-platform strategy, we're going to get more multi-platform games. You kind of can't deny how well Sea of Thieves is doing. So the next game that looks anything like that, likely is going to launch on PlayStation alongside everything else. I just don't think they would deny themselves that revenue at this point. And with Call of Duty and Minecraft being their biggest games already everywhere, at a certain point, what's the difference?
Well, do you think then, because this is one of the things that the community sort of discusses back and forwards, and maybe it's a bit of hopium, but do you think Microsoft has a red line on what kind of games it would bring, like retroactively? Because like Sea of Thieves is retroactive, right? And I think like when they announce a game, like for example, there are a couple of games that I know Microsoft are developing that are going day and date to PlayStation, and I can already see like the drama that's going to cause. You know, there's other games that aren't going to go day and date, and I think that's just purely by virtue of the fact that the developers want to focus on one platform first. You know, like how even now some of Microsoft's games go to PC first before they even come to Xbox, which is another separate discussion. But do you think there's any red lines when it comes to retroactive porting, like your Forza, your Halo, your Gears, and stuff like that? Or do you think they're literally throwing everything on the table right now? And like, just so for anyone listening to this is all speculation, unless specified otherwise. Because I know another thing that both me and Jeff often get headlined about is when we're just discussing a topic on a podcast, and it's a speculation and opinion, and it's not necessarily a report unless explicitly stated to be so. So yeah, do you think anything else could go retroactively? Speculatively, unless specified otherwise.
I think that there are probably red lines. I think red lines that are ones that, well, you still could cross that, but we understand that by doing that, we are making a statement about what we are as a company. And so we have to be very careful about crossing that line. That's the kind of red line I think that they have. They have, buckets that they put all these projects in, ones that will not make that much of a hassle for them, and ones that would be incredible. I mean, obviously, like Halo Infinite gets ported to PlayStation 5. Is that juice worth the squeeze to them? Probably not. That's probably going to cause more of a headache than it would even make you in terms of revenue. So I think that's one where they would treat that very differently than something else. At the same time, we are going to see. I think we're going to see more and more games go multi-platform, retroactive, and in the future. But how many games really are there on that list for retroactive? I don't know how deep that bench is. I think they probably look at a couple more and decide it. But Grounded and Sea of Thieves are the obvious right choices there. And they'll probably look around and see if they can replicate that with anything else. But for the most part, I think they're going to take this forward. And if they feel like something can make them a lot of money from their backbench, they will move that. I just think this is going to be a strategy that grows and grows. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you think that, because my fear, Jeff, about this strategy is that this leads to less people adopting future set hardware, whether it's a handheld or next console, and less people buy it. And because less and less people buy it, devs look at that device and is like, we're not even going to bother making our game for this device because nobody owns it, and then it ends up very, very poorly for anybody who bought said device because of the lack of support. Is that a real thing, or am I kind of just?
Doesn't it feel like we're already heading in that direction? I mean, doesn't it already feel like we're kind of there, just not like?
Because when I look, I don't think so. Because when I look at like, okay. Indie games, sure, they'll go wherever's best, and there are some indie games that do skip Xbox, and even some of the Japanese indie games do. But when I look at like the publishers, Sega fully supports Xbox, and in fact brought Persona and Yakuza over, which I thought never would happen in a million years. Square Enix just had to come out and say, we're fully multi-platform from now on.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of publishers that now support Xbox that really didn't. So I guess I don't know. To me, it seems like the third-party support's been better than it has been in the past, especially like larger Japanese stuff.
Square Enix just came out today and said specifically said that they want to bring more games to Xbox.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think the fact that so they changed their mind from kind of where they were before. But I think the fact that it's a conversation means we're on that like spectrum. It's not deep into it, and it could get a lot worse.
It's not a given.
If that death, exactly. It's not a given, and it could get a lot worse if the death spiral continues, where it's like, hey, people are buying less hardware, so people are buying less games on that hardware, and so we're going to make fewer games for that hardware. So now fewer people are buying the hardware. Like that's the death spiral that we're talking about, and it feels like it's at least on like the warning, like when you're looking down at the instruments, like it's giving you warning that you're falling into that. I don't think it's like full, like they could pull out of it, obviously, if they hit with a bunch of games that really get people talking and become stuff that you cannot ignore. That's the only real solution here. So that could still happen. But I think, that is clearly a path in front of them that they could fall into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my worry. That's why I didn't really particularly like this, because it's just like it could end up in a very, very bad place.
Well, I mean, it just goes back to the narrative, goes back to the story. Like everything in our lives are just stories. You know, the United States of America doesn't exist. It's just a story. The law against murder, just a story. But we all agree on these things because they're powerful and they have ramifications, and we treat them as important. And this is true of companies as well, and corporations and brands, and they can only last as much as we sort of all agree that they matter and are important. And some of these choices feel like they are putting dents in that armor for Xbox, and more people are asking, as we see in headlines and tweets and replies and message boards, people keep asking, what is the point of Xbox? And just by asking that question over and over again, it creates a world where it's more likely that people answer, there is no point, I've moved on. And at a certain point, you get past the point of no return, and it's hard to pull the brand back from that precipice.
Yeah. We do got a question here, kind of in regards to hardware. Monkey versus Tramp says, hey guys, I was going to ask you all the human centipede question again, but perhaps now isn't the time. Mr. Grubb, have you heard any rumors about the Xbox handheld? Also, I'm still rocking that Phil Spencer t-shirt you made.
Hey, great. I love it. I've heard the rumors. I think that most other people have been hearing. And I think it kind of all goes back to the kinds of things where we say, hey, they're always looking at these things. I think they are looking at it very seriously. And we will, in a couple of years, get to a point where this thing's going to launch. I'm taking it kind of as a given, though. Clearly, Phil is big into the handheld stuff. I think they are right now trying to figure out what the future of Xbox hardware looks like so that they can build the best handheld possible. And I bet it'll be an Xbox branded handheld, and I bet underneath it'll be running Windows is kind of how it'll go. And that makes a lot of sense. I'd be fine with that.
I think a handheld makes sense for users of the ecosystem that are already in place, because a lot of people would want to take their Xbox games on the go. I'm just curious about what is the addressable market for an Xbox handheld?
Well, I mean, I think that's why you need to get to this point where they're talking about, hey, you could sideload, there's the suggestion that you could sideload any store onto there, and Windows now allows people to bring their own payment processing systems into the Windows Store, or at least that's a plan. I think they're like, hey, we want this thing to be as open as possible, so that everyone will treat it as a device they can use, and hopefully the default will be Xbox, and you'll buy the games through us. I think is what they're hoping for.
Right, but I guess the other question I have in that lane is there actually a market for PC handhelds like that, or is it just Nintendo has fooled everybody into thinking there's an actual market there? Because from all reports, the Steam Deck, even though everybody loves it, hasn't really set the world on fire in regards to sales.
I think there's a reason that everyone is making one now, and it's because it's sold way better than anyone thought it would. So it's a slow burn, but it seems like a whole other pillar and tier for sale. Like, yeah, the Steam Deck is not sold like the Switch.
Marketing. It's had no marketing.
Yes, and you can't buy it at the Best Buy. You can't buy it at Best Buy. Like you can only get it through Valve on their Steam store. And so with that like limitation in mind, I think it's sold really well. And there's a market there for it, because a lot of people really like handhelds, which is why I think the strategy is a big, expensive box for the home that feels like a boutique, PC/console, and then a handheld that is a handheld PC that is very consoleized in how it presents your games, but can run any game from any store if you so choose. It's probably the right move.
Would that be something that interests you?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yes, I love like I said, I'm primarily Switch and Steam Deck.
You love your Steam Deck.
Oh, I love my Steam Deck. Yes,
You love
really,
your Steam
really
Deck
do.
and you love your Nintendo.
See,
Yes, that's right. That's me.
When you live with other people, and there's people want to fight over the TV, and maybe you want a system you can pick up and put down and move to another room for whatever reason. Like life, life can be chaos. Like my I know I ain't got any kids, obviously, but
that you know about.
Thank God.
Oh God,
no jazzes, no little jazzes.
Yeah, that I know about. But I noticed that amongst my gamer friends circle, and this is obviously qualitative evidence, is that Steam Deck is super popular with parents because they can keep an eye on, because the kids ain't gonna sit still. They're gonna move from room to room to room. You can potentially take your Steam Deck with you and keep playing Balatro or Vampire Survivors or whatever else on the move around your house. I do think I think an Xbox handheld is kind of inevitable, but I don't think.
Yeah, I think a PlayStation handheld's inevitable once again.
I think so, yeah. But I don't think either of these devices are going to be a silver bullet. I think Sony said in their financials that the demand outstripped supply for the PlayStation Portal, but then they also admitted that the sales weren't exactly spectacular.
No, yeah, there's a reason they haven't sort of reloaded retailers with that thing either. Yeah,
I think it was probably a good learning experience for them, but Microsoft's having its learning experience with the Asus ROG Ally, and all the issues that Windows brings along.
Well,
yeah, that brings along for the ride. So
right, so I think you fix that up, you make the Windows Xbox layer experience work really well with a handheld. You make it so when you put the thing to sleep, it stays to sleep. That sort of thing. And I don't know. I think an Xbox handheld can do very well if they do it right. But you're right. No silver bullet. That's not what we're talking about here. Not like Switch sales. We're not talking about that.
Well, I don't
either.
think anybody's expecting Switch sales.
No way. Yes, yeah.
But I'm even curious to see how the Switch 2 is even going to sell, because
it'll sell less as not as well as the Switch 1.
You have our buddy Special Nick saying they should name it the Super Nintendo Switch. And I was like, if they name it
Nintendo, sold less than Nintendo. So yeah, I mean,
but wouldn't you feel if you named it Super Nintendo Switch, then most people would think it's not like a new system, kind of like the Wii U to the Wii?
They might. I mean, but I think enough people are still around that associate Super Nintendo with, that's the next thing after the Nintendo.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but I think the underlying point here is the Super Nintendo sold less than the Nintendo. The let's see here. The 3DS sold less than the DS. The Game Boy Advance sold less than the Game Boy. The Wii U obviously sold less than the Wii. Nintendo does these sequel systems, and they never sell as well as the original. And I think we're in for the same thing here. That doesn't mean it's going to sell poorly. If it sells as well as the 3DS, they'll still find a way to make a lot of money because the 80, 90 million people that will show up for that system are going to be the ones that spend the most on video games. And that turns out that's what really matters. But yeah, I'm not expecting them to be able to replicate that, especially in a world now with Steam Decks and a lot of people learning the lessons of the Switch and being able to apply that to other form factors.
Yeah. You mentioned also a future Xbox console. What does that even look like? We've heard Phil talk about wanting to open it up and put competitor stores on said device and stuff. I think
that's a long-term. That's a long-term play. You want to hear my conspiracy theory for that one?
Yeah, I would love to hear your conspiracy theory.
They're doing that so that when they go down the line and go in front of regulators and say, hey, we should have everyone allow every store on their device, they can launch the Xbox store on a PlayStation and start selling games directly to PlayStation gamers. I think they're playing that game. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think that's something that is likely to happen. But I think that is in the back of their head as they make all these plays. They're like, yeah, okay, well, so we can't sell the hardware, but what if we just brought our store with Call of Duty onto that device and we sold Call of Duty directly to those gamers? And the regulators forced Sony to let us do it. I think there's a possibility they're thinking that long term.
I actually agree with you. I actually kind of thought the same. It was like, what if you go to the regular? one, you should allow us to buy this company because we allow competitor stores on our platform. And guess what? All of our games are multi-platform anyways. So there's no chance of us taking it and making it exclusive. Plus, if you can buy whatever game you want. You don't even have to buy from our store. We're so open, regulators.
You know,
maybe this is something you should force Nintendo and Sony to follow.
I think they feel the wind blowing in that direction already. Yep.
Yeah.
You know what makes me cringe so hard about that is that Microsoft will invest millions of dollars to lobby regulators.
Yep.
And in some countries you have to do that. Like, and in Europe we call that corruption, but in America we call it lobbying, right?
Right.
And
I mean, they're manipulating. This is what they do. I think you're getting to the same point. That they would spend all this time and effort manipulating the environment so it's more friendly to them. When it's like, what if you made really good games that people couldn't ignore?
That's what I was saying. Like, why?
They put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
This is my problem with the Xbox right now. It's my problem with Starfield is that they were like, hey, we have a game that people played for 10 years in Skyrim. So our next game, we're going to build it so you could play it for 10 years. And then they didn't get the foundation, the basics right. And that's Xbox's problem writ large, that they have these long-term visions, 2 billion players. We're building a world where we're going to be able to get to all of that. In the meantime, I thought we agreed you were going to make awesome games that people couldn't ignore. And it feels like, that's more optional than everything else here. So yeah, I get frustrated by it.
Yeah,
I think there's the upper like Microsoft strategy, and then there's like, okay, here's the games for Xbox. Like,
definitely.
You know, I mean, what do you think? Hellblade 2, let me ask you this. Like, Hellblade 2 comes out next week. Are you, well, even if it like say is like an amazing, 9 out of 10, whatever, do people even after all the recent stuff with Xbox, do you think that even moves the needle in that regard of like, but I do agree with you. Like, Xbox needs a consistent, steady cadence of like, this game's great, this game's amazing, this game's really good, because like for a long time it's been like, okay, this game's good, but then the next one's crap. Okay, this game's okay, but then the next one's shit, right?
Yep.
Like 2023, for example, Hi-Fi Rush, big surprise, people loved it. One of the best games of last year, but then Minecraft Legends was a game everybody forgot existed a week after it came out. Redfall came out and was a complete disaster. Starfield came out.
Pentiment, game of the year.
Pentiment in 2022, but that was the only game Xbox decided to release. But even with Starfield in 2023, a game that I liked more than I ever thought I would, because I hadn't played a Bethesda game since like Fallout 3 or Skyrim rather. It really seemed like Starfield it didn't hit the levels that it should have for a lot of people, like critically. And then Forza Motorsport came and went, and people seem to have forgot about that after a week. So like when I look at Microsoft, it's like the consistency isn't there. They have Hellblade 2 and Avowed this year, and the new Call of Duty, and Microsoft Flight Sim, and potentially Towerborn and stuff. Like, I think you still can come back from it if every single release that you put out there is of really good stuff.
Correct.
But maybe I'm too positive on that. Maybe I'm too just like,
I felt better about that a few years ago than I do now.
Okay. So
I think you're right that it could still happen if they're able to do that. But I think the Xbox reaction that we're seeing right now to the state of sales and the state of revenue is because they don't believe in the games that they have coming up. I think that's what they're signifying here. It's like they were biding their time and they were being patient up until Starfield. And then when Starfield didn't do what it needed to do for them to make this all make sense, when it didn't grow Game Pass single-handedly from 30 to 40 million, I think they were like, okay, everything else that we had, we never believed was going to be as impactful as Starfield, and Starfield wasn't as impactful as Starfield. So we got to rethink everything. I think that's what they're trying to communicate to us in so many words. And so, yeah, I'm not quite as hopeful. Does that mean that that's all she wrote? No, of course not. But yeah, I'm like at a point where I'm like, we need to be listening when they're talking to us, because for a couple years there, they were talking to us and telling us, hey, we of course we might put stuff anywhere, or they would tell us a variety of things, and I'd be like, okay, well, yeah, the Xbox console sales are still number one most important thing, right? It's like, well, no, we just care about Game Pass and wherever that's at. And it took a while for that to sink into me. And now it's like, okay, this time when they're talking to us, I'm going to listen to what they're saying, and I think that's what they're saying.
Right. ARW as a comment here in chat. It says Starfield has the same open critic aggregate as Miles Morales and a higher one than Ghost of Tsushima. It reviewed fine, but it seems like everyone who disliked it gaslit people who liked it initially. You see, I would say that people's expectations for Starfield was that it was going to be Skyrim 2, essentially.
Yeah, I didn't feel that way about Starfield that I felt about Skyrim, and Oblivion before it, and Fallout 4 even.
I think there is something about the Starfield discourse. There is something unique about it because
there is like an uphill battle.
Yeah, if you have like nostalgia can elevate your experience with the game. And I experienced this with Pokemon a lot. And I've talked about this on the show before. Modern Pokemon games are absolute trash. But because they're Pokemon, I can still play them and enjoy them. I kind of feel like, to some degree, and I'm not calling Starfield trash by any means. Like, I'm talking about like Sword and Shield. Like, if it didn't have the Pokemon brand attached to it, it's just like this terrible Unity game, buggy, and there's just nothing to do and all this kind of stuff, right? But like with Starfield, I think like there was like the discourse of it was wrapped in nostalgia in some ways, where some people who had nostalgia for Skyrim were disappointed by it because it wasn't like Skyrim enough. And there was other people who liked it because it was like Skyrim enough for them, Like for me, I was disappointed that it didn't have... I was disappointed it wasn't more violent because I was trying to play it like it was Fallout. I think that's the thing with Bethesda RPGs, is that they're so unique that they're always viewed through the lens of what came before. And what came before is very different and subjective to the different person and the different, whether you're a Skyrim fan or a Fallout fan, probably had like there's different aspects of it that didn't work. Like, for example, if you're a Fallout fan, you probably there's something felt off about it, the fact that it doesn't have a radio or gore or violence. Or if you're a Skyrim fan, it probably felt off how lacking in density and how long you had to travel to actually find something meaningful to do. And a lot of the time, the exploration, the investment you put in exploration, the payload isn't there. Like, the exploration is so bad. So like people who trying to play it like either one of these games had reasons to be disappointed in it, I think. And if you're a fan of both, there's probably a lot more reasons to be disappointed. They don't have enough identity of its own, I think, is probably the issue. But
I think it got mired in what feels like a lot of cruft, and to answer the question, does it, were people green or gaslighting or get people? I think it was a fun punching bag for a lot of people. Yeah, and if that's what you're talking about, I get it. But I think looking at the Metacritic for this game is not telling the whole story of what went down. It's much more complicated than that, and the expectations were much higher. And the difference between an 80, what it was like 84, difference between an 84 and a 94 is actually much different than the difference between like a 64 and a 74. There's such a hard gap to cross there to become one of those top games of all time. And people expected it to be a lot closer to the 94. We're hoping for it to be a lot closer to the 94 range than where it ended up.
Yeah.
And those expectations are, whether they're fair or unfair, it's a game I like. It had a lot of problems, and it felt incomplete when I was actually just trying to find the fun, which I did not feel that. I don't feel that way about all the other Bethesda games I've played, save 76 at launch.
I'm a 76 apologist as well, even at launch.
I like 76 now, yeah.
Yeah. Are you playing it right now these days? 76?
Played it a little bit. I got it on my Steam Deck again. I've been playing it a little bit here and there.
Man, I wish I had crossplay so bad. I know so many people who are on PC and so many people are on Xbox and can't play together. I actually have a interview coming up with them where I ask them this question. I want to give you a question from our Patreon, Jeff, which kind of dovetails into what we were talking about a little bit earlier. This is from Governor Grimm. I know that I'm cognizant of the fact that we don't have you super, like
Yeah, I'm here for now.
Me and Rand went for 5 hours last Friday.
Hey,
yeah, I get
a lot to
complaints.
talk about, right?
I
So
get complaints from Xbox PR saying like we can't do a decent summary of this because it's too long. But yeah, this one's from Governor Grimm, and I thought this was interesting because it touches on what we were talking about earlier, and how Xbox has this sort of chaos aura amongst it right now. Governor Grimm says, "Do you gentlemen think Xbox will provide a clear vision for the brand going forward at the showcase, which is coming up on June 9th, and we can talk about some of our predictions for that and dovetail into this? Do they have a clear vision for the future, or are they just hunting for more rakes to step on?"
risky rakes.
Risky rake.
I mean, my guess here is they will try to present a very clear and unified vision. But the sense I get is in this moment that we're in right now over in Redmond, they're deciding exactly what that vision is still. I think they're still having conversations about every aspect. I believe those rumors that they were having conversations about whether or not Call of Duty was going to be in Game Pass. And I also believe that when they say it will be in Game Pass, it's the kind of thing where, of course, they have that conversation. But I think that's an illustration that everything is on the table for discussion, and there's no guarantees that anything's going to end up in any one way. Now, once they have decided, they'll do their best to present that unified vision at the showcase. But I think they're gonna have a really tough time making people believe the story they're being told then, especially if it sounds even like a modicum different than the story they were telling last year, which I think my expectation is it's gonna sound different than what the story they were telling last year. So it's like, well, you were saying one thing last year and the year before that, and now you're saying this. Well, when the going gets tough, when are you going to abandon this story? So yeah.
So you think like people are just going to be just won't believe anything Xbox says because of
they'll be more skeptical. Yeah,
a lot more skeptical than they have been. So I guess like on the topic of showcase and what we expect, you had mentioned Perfect Dark and how
sounds like it's going to be there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be there, but you talked about its development, and that's you would hear like, maybe it wasn't going so good, but also, that's what happens in video game development. Not everything's going,
Yes, and that's exactly how I would frame it. It's like, I talked to a couple people that worked on the game in the last several months, like in the at least this calendar year, and the story they told was like, hey, the things I'm working on aren't coming together. They don't look great. And it's like, I've just heard that so many times from so many games that do end up coming together that it's like, I usually do hesitate before reporting that stuff. But in the moment, it was like, everything's falling apart for Xbox. I mean, I'm also hearing this. But then, I talked to a few more people and it's like, okay, it's definitely that kind of thing where game development is complicated and messy. And yes, some people are dealing with a lot of headaches, but it's nothing that this team doesn't feel like they won't be able to overcome. And that sounds like they're gonna get a chance to prove it at the Xbox showcase. So I'm hopeful it looks good. I'm pulling for that game. I want Perfect Dark. There's a world in which Perfect Dark is my most anticipated game, and I hope I come out of the show feeling that way.
What is your most anticipated game right now? Anyways, I'm just curious.
God, yeah. I when I think off the top of my head, well, it probably is Metroid Prime 4. I'm a huge Metroid Prime mark, so it's
Are we expecting that this year, Jeff? This year thing? Next year?
I hope it's this year, but I honestly think they've probably decided to move it to the launch of the Switch 2, so probably not. But there's still a chance. Still a chance. What were you saying, Jess?
Are there any other games like beyond Perfect Dark that you hope to see show up? God, that was a weird sentence to say. Hope to see show up at the Xbox showcase. It's almost like she sells seashells by the seashore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll see just about everything they've talked about previously. I don't think we will, but I would really enjoy that everything that they've previously announced at least gets an update. I think stuff they'll pick and choose. They can only focus on so many things. But I really come out. I'm going into this like I hope Avowed wows me, and I hope that there are some surprises. I hope some of the games that we heard about years ago actually show up. I don't know. Overall, I'm just like I want this to feel like a lot of the check marks on stuff that we've known about get checked, and we can feel good about those. Because then it could be like, okay, and now it's time to get excited about new games possibly getting announced, and we can look forward to those instead of having these albatrosses hanging around their neck that they still haven't delivered on. And then it's like pie in the sky, the rumor that's happened in the past couple of years. I would love it if it were true that we're getting a Banjo-Kazooie. I'm not like saying that is my hope. Definitely not. It's not even speculation. I'm not even speculating it'll be there. I'm saying I would hope it would be. That would be great.
Yeah, maybe they need to throw a bone to the fans of being like, after all that's gone up, like, hey, you wanted that Banjo game, right? Well, here it is. It's coming.
Yeah. It would have such a different shifting the gears, right? Where it's like, hey, we got so many of these other things happening that we got a lot of shooters, a lot of Western RPGs, and here's something a little bit different to flesh out our offerings. That'd be great.
Yeah. You know, Jeff said Gears in that sentence. That's a tease as well. You know, Gears.
That actually, go ahead, take that one that way. Now, there's things which are always changing, but Gears probably should be at that showcase.
Gears probably should be. I mean, there's also, you know, the rumor about Gears Collection.
Yeah, I've never heard about that personally, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it came to PlayStation.
I would not be surprised either.
Yep.
I know it sort of seems like one of the things where if you do announce a Gear 6 and it is next year, then like if you are doing a collection, then that's got to be this year. You can't, you know, like it would have to be. Do you
think Gear 6 would be next year? Because it's definitely something I've heard, but I've also heard that like it might slip.
I mean, I don't know. I've heard Perfect Dark is next year. I don't really vibe with that. But
yeah, that's where I'm at. Where like I don't vibe with these things. That's like I don't necessarily.
I'm also of the opinion like you need to give the games as much time as they can possibly, you know, to be as good as possible. You know, so it's like okay, and they do have a lot of games like this year. You know, like they haven't really delivered anything. The first half of the year besides Hellblade, which is my most anticipated game, and it's been my most anticipated game since 2019 when they announced it because I love Hellblade 1. So I'm gonna be getting that, and they do have a strong end of the year with Avowed and Call of Duty and Indiana Jones and you know, the Diablo expansions, World of Warcraft, all those sort of things that are all there. But then you look at like what next year could be, and it's like you could have Fable, you could have Forza Horizon 6 because I'm assuming that's being worked on. You could have you know, Gears, you could have Perfect Dark, you could have new Doom, which I expect to be at the showcase. And, you know, because they're all, a lot of, like South of Midnight, Compulsion would have to be getting ready, Clockwork Revolution.
Yeah, what's the Contraband? Does he think any chance we get that? That'd be great.
I mean, you would think so, considering we haven't seen it since 2021.
Exactly.
And, you know, what about Everwild? That's
about Everwild?
I mean, granted, now that Sea of Thieves is a huge hit on PlayStation, maybe it's like, okay, you can take more time to make sure that game needs to be what it is, because Sea of Thieves is still kicking, but it definitely seems we're about to enter the era of where like Xbox has a whole bunch of games finally coming. We've taken a long time to get to this point,
and they all go to PlayStation.
It's just sort of disappointing that like everybody's kind of down on Xbox because of the things that they're doing and the things that they've done, and it's like, you know, like it's just.
If Lucy was like 1,000,000%, I promise the football is going to be in front of you when you kick in the fourth quarter of 2014.
Oh, no, not a Charlie Brown thing. Oh my God.
Yes, but I mean, right, but that's where we're at. Like the football's been moved enough times. It really has been. And I think people are just sick of it. And it's broken the camel's back, as we said earlier. And now they aren't selling Xbox consoles almost at all. So that's not like some you know, everyone decided. It's like this is like a collective thing that people can't help but feel, and it's being expressed through how people are spending their money.
So with the console situation and the sales, why do you think it's as depressed as it is? Because it wasn't really ever this bad with the Xbox One, which a lot of people thought was a joke of a system. It didn't really have a lot of great games.
Yeah, it did pretty good
either. Well, I mean, it still did pretty when you look at like what it ended up in, but a lot of people considered the Xbox One a joke, or at least, you know, when in 2013. But what do you think the low say? Is it because people are just like, we were going to give Xbox a second chance and you let us down? PlayStation just a much better purchase, or value wise? Like, is it all of that, and just people are just like, you know what, we're not even going to bother with Xbox. PlayStation is just a choice at this point.
I think it goes back to the telling the story. When you are going to spend $300 to $500, That for the vast majority of people, that is such a monumental ask that they have to convince themselves. You have to get them arguing against themselves and are kind of arguing against their own best interest to the point where they can justify themselves with all of these pros and a pro versus con list. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna, if I buy this system, I'm gonna get this, and that's coming, and I can play all of these games. And I think Xbox did a good job with Game Pass last generation of offering that compelling argument up to a point. And then it's like we go in this generation, it's like, well, and the compelling argument is going to be all these games are launching that you can't ignore. And then that never really manifested. So I think when people have that argument with themselves, why don't you just save your money and buy something else instead? Go get a Steam Deck. Go get, just buy more games for the PS5 you likely already own. It's hard to win that argument in that situation.
Right. We got a question here from Patreon. Laser Wolf says, Jeff, you've been saying for a while that the future of creativity in video games is with the indies. Do you think creativity is dead at Xbox and at PlayStation?
I mean, dead is like maybe overstating it, but it's the soil isn't very fertile in those places. And that's because, can anything happen at an Xbox? Can anything happen at a PlayStation? No, you got a huge bureaucracy that needs to approve every game that gets made, and you have to justify it to 4 or 5 different bosses, and you have to have at least estimations of a 15% profit margin, likely a lot more these days because a lot of games as a service has really skewed things. So anything can't happen at these companies. Where can anything happen? Where can a new game idea blast off and become a billion copy seller, or make $1 billion? It's Steam Early Access. That's where it's been for the last 10, 15 years. Anything can happen on Steam Early Access. It continues to be that way. And I don't see these companies changing that. Even with their own early access programs, it's not the exact same thing. So, when you look at the last couple of ideas, like where the last huge trends in gaming, where have they come from? Yeah, there's been some stuff on mobile, but for the most part, it has been Steam Early Access, PUBG and extraction shooters. And before that, survival games like Rust. These things are massive, massive successes, and they all come from Steam Early Access.
We got a question here from OMG Turtles. He says, Jeff, I just want to get your opinion on the marketing within Xbox. It's always been a hot topic as they seem to do the bare minimum. But then Greenberg put out a tweet boasting about all the marketing for Hellblade 2, and then nobody has really seen any. At the same time, Tiger Eye Travis said in the Bitcast that he knows people in the marketing department, and that department has been gutted in recent layoffs. Do you think Xbox is bad at marketing, or are they saving resources until they really feel like they need to market? Thanks, guys. Love you all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both, but it's recently in the recent years, these companies have shortened their marketing campaigns over and over and over again. And who really started this was Bethesda with Fallout 4. Or before that, games had to be announced several years ahead of time, and the pre-order date was announced so far ahead of time, and there was years of pre-release coverage. And then Fallout 4 comes, and they say, hey, it's going to be out in 6 months. And the game did really well, and there seemed to be no detrimental effects from only having a 6-month marketing campaign. And then since then, there's been over and over again, we've seen games be like, well, what if we had like a 3-month marketing campaign or 2 months? And each time, for the most part, there's been no detrimental effect. So these companies are saving a lot of money because marketing is very expensive. It's one of their highest costs next to labor, is the amount of money they spend on marketing. And so every time they find that these results where these games continue to sell just fine without having to put a lot into marketing, they're like, oh, why are we doing this? And they cut back more and more and more. And now they're in a situation where it's like, this is the best practices. And so now they have to justify getting a big marketing campaign when a game needs it. And that's an uphill climb. And a lot of times they're just like, we'll just try the thing we've been doing recently. We'll talk about it on social media, do a few other things, and hope for the best. And now we're in this situation. So yeah, I think they keep wanting to save that money, and it's going to hurt some games here or there. And Hellblade 2 feels like it might be in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing discussion is always the thing that people go back to all the time, and it's like, well, you better be marketing Call of Duty, because if you want to talk about a game that potentially could, I don't know, sell hardware, really get down to it, That would be one of them. Do you know if the new Call of Duty is cutting off last gen at all?
Interesting. I haven't thought about it. No, I don't know.
Because we talked about, and I think even Jez has an article he's writing about how he feels, or like essentially that this is all kind of short-sighted by Xbox in a way. Because Jez, we talked about last week about like you have GTA 5 coming next year, which could revitalize the market, and you could miss out on that if you kind of maybe continue the path that you've been on. And I was thinking of another game that could essentially sell consoles, what have you, and that's Call of Duty, because I think there's still a large amount of people on last gen playing on their Xbox Ones or playing on their PS4s.
I'll put it out there. I've heard that half of Xbox's monthly active users are still on Xbox One. And you know, when Microsoft talks about how their console install base is bigger than ever, they said this in the financial quarter as well. They said that console install active users bigger than ever, right? That's because the Xbox One is still so supported. Like, it has the same operating system as the Series S and Series X. So if I'm a person who only plays Call of Duty and FIFA and Fortnite, there's literally no reason to upgrade. No reason. It's still 60 frames and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, and really, it's like when you think about it, if they were to stop updating the OS, what would be the reason to upgrade then? It's like, well, what games are you playing that you can't get on Xbox One that you can only get on Xbox Series X and S? And the reality is, for a lot of people, it's like the answer is going to be zero, because they have their Fortnite, they have their Call of Duties, they have all the multiplayer shooters that already work. And so asking these people to upgrade for reasons they don't quite understand, with like better frame rate and higher resolutions, many of them probably still are playing on 1080p screens. I know that 4K are like $300 these days, but not everyone's upgraded. It's a hard argument again to win. It goes back to that, where it's like, what is the story people are telling themselves when they have to make a decision to buy these consoles, and they're like, well, I'm already playing the game I want to play, which is Fortnite and Roblox or whatever.
Yeah, which is why I was saying, like, maybe a game that, you know, Call of Duty could be a game that sells consoles if you get rid of the last generation port, but then Warzone's still going to be there across generations regardless. So maybe, and I looked last gen, they dropped they dropped the Xbox 360 right around 2016 with Infinite Warfare. They still did,
if
like,
they timed that with putting it in Game Pass, there's something there.
That's what I was thinking. Like, if you put it in Game Pass and you have the marketing and it's like only available on PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, then everybody who's on previous gen might have to upgrade it, and
they have to make a choice, right? Do I go with PlayStation or do I go with Xbox where I can get it from Game Pass? There's something there for sure.
There's some, but I don't know.
But then there's also the argument that, like, well, Call of Duty Warzone's still updated on Xbox One. Maybe I'll just not upgrade at all and keep playing that instead.
Yeah. You know? Well, that's the thing. Like,
a lot of people decide that.
What if Activision says we're not even going to ever get rid of last gen?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, why would they? Because it's like do games need to look that much better than that? No. You know, what's the best looking game still to this day? It's Last of Us Part 2 from several years ago, or is it Red Dead Redemption 2 from even further ago? Like, what's the thing making games look better? Money. That's it. It's not hardware. So yeah, at a certain point, why would you design games that don't run on those systems when it's like, that just would take extra money? We don't see any extra benefit from doing so.
Yeah. I know we have a question. We have a question here from Joaquin. I know you're not going to be able to answer it, but I'll ask it anyways. He's like, Yo Grubb, what is People Can Fly working on? What established Xbox IP are they doing? Is it Gears?
I remember hearing about this, but I don't remember exactly what it was, so I can't answer it. You are correct. Yeah. Yes.
Project Maverick, I believe, is the name.
Right. Yeah.
But no idea what Xbox IP they may or may not be working on. So yeah, I think we have another question here. Eric says, Jeff, what are your guys' thoughts on the topic of Microsoft gaming isn't Xbox gaming? That was kind of a big thing that came out of Ryan McCaffrey's article.
I can't remember who said it, but it's like they've been telling us that story for a long time. I mean, at the same time, I'm like,
Warren, I think.
Yeah, Tom. I'm like, yeah, Tom's got it. Like, for years they've been trying to tell us this. And yet, like when they would tell us this, it's like, no, Xbox is going to be everywhere. Like they've said that for a long time. And Xbox is a platform unto itself, regardless of the hardware. And they'll keep making hardware. They're not saying they're not doing that. But when we say that, what we're also saying is, and it's going to be everywhere. So, yeah, I think that's part of that story they were telling then. And we just weren't listening. It's one of the things I was mentioning when I say, well, I should be listening when they're telling us these things. But I don't know. I think people are making a kind of a mountain of a molehill there a little bit, where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a clever play of words, but this is the company that it's been for quite some time now.
Yeah, I actually have some details on exactly what Xbox on every screen looks like now. And I think what it is that every Xbox game will have a consistent social UI across all the games. So, like, if you're playing Sea of Thieves, for example, on a PlayStation, you'll be able to bring up a mini Xbox guide or something like that. Kind of like Battle.net, sort of.
Like the Nintendo Miiverse.
Yeah,
let's
like
go.
the Miiverse. So, like, I've even got a code name for it. I think it's is it Roseway? Is that what it is, Rand? Rand, did I tell you about this, Rand? I can't remember.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I told you about this.
Oh, was it you who told me about it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
this sounds like the direction it's headed for sure. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, but I knew Roseway before you, Rand. I think
You never mentioned it until I told you about it, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not looking for credit on this.
I'm looking for credit. Shut up, Rand.
I know you're looking for credit. Yeah. And the whole Microsoft gaming thing for me was a bit weird because, these town halls that they do, Jeff, right? That Xbox does with employees and things of that nature, where they talk. I know, like, I have somebody who'll send me the audio from those. And they talk about Microsoft Gaming all the time, like, oh, here at Microsoft Gaming, Microsoft Gaming this and Microsoft. It's just like, it sort of seems like it's been a thing for a while, But I guess it's the idea of like the soul of Xbox,
right?
What it used to be is dying or being kind of snuffed out, or the light has been lessened and it's more.
Right, people mourn over time, right? Like, you feel like you lost something in the moment, and there's a little bit of denial there, but you're sad about it. But you're like, okay, well, maybe things can go back to the way they were, and then over time, as your worst fears are confirmed, you mourn again. And I think we're just in that like secondary mourning period for what Xbox once meant to people. And again, it's not dying, it's not going away, but that's the soul of it is changing. I think that's undeniable.
Yeah, like the money men are in charge, as they say.
Hey,
right?
Well,
like
that's
all that
true
sort of
everywhere.
stuff. We got another question. This kind of up your alley because it's about Nintendo. But what Xbox games will support the Switch 2 launch, in your opinion?
Probably not Hi-Fi Rush.
No, you don't think so?
No,
Didn't it just get rated for the Switch?
Right. And then what did they say in their statement when they got shut down? It's like, it'll still be available only where we've already released it, or however they phrased it.
That's such a shame.
Yep, it sucks. It's a joke. I don't know. I tell you what, I'll play Pentiment again if they put it out again on the new one. Like, I'll buy it. It's already on the Switch, right? I'll buy it again on the Switch too. I don't care. I like that game so much.
What about Sea of Thieves? That seems like a game that would do exceedingly well on the Switch.
Sea of Thieves, it will probably be on the Switch too. That sounds like it'll happen. They got Grounded on there. That'll get an update to run better on Switch too. And then Sea of Thieves, very likely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would expect Sea of Thieves to be kind of a launch game.
That's
just me, though.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how long we have before, Jeff. So if you got to go, just let me know, because Jez didn't tell me if you had any time constraints or not.
I can go to the top of the hour, so another 20 minutes or so.
Okay, so is it PlayStation Showcase time? Essentially, so we got the Xbox One, we got a PlayStation One. Do you feel good about their? Well, I think they even mentioned yesterday there's going to be one, right?
I think people kind of misread. They were saying they were going to talk about stuff again, and what they were talking about, what PlayStation was referring to, or what Sony was referring to, was their meeting with investors, and a lot of people took that to mean a showcase. But if you look to last year, they had a showcase on the day they had meetings with investors.
Right.
So I don't think that's necessarily a complete misread, but that's not what Sony was saying. And yet, yeah, they're supposed to have a showcase this month. That's what I keep hearing.
Anything you're expecting to see from the showcase?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some stuff that I'm hopeful for, and then the things that I would expect to see. I mean, Concord. It's about time we see what that game actually is beyond what we've seen. So,
what is Concord supposed to be? Is that from Bungie?
No. That's the Marathon's the other game from Bungie.
Oh yeah.
And that's an extraction shooter, last we heard. Although that's probably going to change. Concord is the one from. What's her name? Yeah,
Firewalk, I believe. Yeah.
What's her name? Jade Raymond Studio.
No, that's
a
Fair
different
Games.
studio.
That's Fair Games.
Okay,
yes.
that's Fair Games, right?
This is Concord is from Firework. It's supposed to be a sci-fi shooter.
Yes, and I think the trailer is always like that cheeseburger wiggling around.
Yes, the cheeseburger.
Whatever. Either way, we should see that. And then the other game that I'm pretty sure we'll see at the show is Astro. A sequel to Astro's Playroom of some sort.
That's like one of the best games on the PlayStation.
It still is the best game on the PlayStation. Yeah. I would be very excited about that. I hope that ends up being exactly the case. And then, this is where they talk about PS5 Pro. I think that's pretty likely.
Do you think there's a market for the PS5 Pro?
Yeah. It's called the 10% of people that buy, that do everything it takes to get a PlayStation 5 on launch day. They will buy that system again. It's the same thing that Nintendo does, where there was like 6 revisions of the DS and the 3DS or whatever, and I bought several of those because I'm a Nintendo sucker, and so I showed up and what I do is I take my old system and I either hand it off to a friend or to a cousin, or I sell it on the secondhand market, and so they're still growing their overall install base by selling hardware to the same person again and again. And they 100% are counting on that with the PS5 Pro. It will be the PlayStation diehards showing up for that thing.
Sure. Do you think it's needed? Is the price going to be like a concern here?
It'll be higher. It'll be a higher price, and I don't think it's needed, and I don't think developers want it. But Sony wants it. For one thing, it helps them step up the price, which is very useful for them long term. So now when this thing comes down at $600, in whatever range it is, but maybe $600, that makes it so it's a little, well, obviously when the PS6 comes out, that has to at least be $600. It's like these choices are interconnected and all affect one another. And it's part of a larger strategy of how do you position these things long term, and how do we maximize the average revenue per user for these people that want to spend even more money on our stuff because they're our diehard fans. This is one of those methods that they're using to do that.
Right, and I know last year's showcase wasn't received very well by a lot of people, and it was kind of like, what's going on?
What are you talking about? It was awesome.
Yeah, okay, Jez. Yeah, okay. Jez was also telling people it was going to be a fire show, and then it wasn't.
I got in trouble for that too. I'm like, the people that put the show together think they have something. That's what I heard, and so I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to be the good one. And everyone got mad at me too. So
yeah,
I said that based on a couple of games, but I can't remember what the games were now, off the top of my head. Was one Metal Gear Solid maybe? I don't know.
That wasn't that in a state of play later? I can't remember. Maybe that was in the showcase.
No, it was at that show because it was the CGI trailer. It was the one where they went down the swamp and but that was the one where they had the Gran Turismo trailer and they didn't really show any. Yeah, they didn't really show any first party stuff, and people were like, "What the hell?" Because they hadn't done a showcase the previous year because they skipped it. So people were expecting a big blowout.
That was going to be the year where they caught everything up because they've obviously been working on stuff. That's why they've been so quiet. And then it wasn't that show. Right. I remember that's how it went now. Yes.
So then people, but this year you would expect okay, well.
You would, but then this is the year where they said they won't have any sequel, major, first party sequel blockbusters throughout the entire calendar year. It's like, oh my God. Okay. But that doesn't mean they can't have stuff.
Is really the dev time of large AAA games hurting everything is
obviously
7 years now to do something like this.
Yes, 100%. It is a problem. This is this is not new. We've been saying this on podcasts, and when I was writing about games at GamesBeat in 2014, this is unsustainable. We are heading in a direction that is unsustainable, and we're just there. We're there now. And these companies have got to rethink some of the ways that they're doing things because they can't keep getting bigger and taking more time. That would be crazy. You can't have if games take longer, you get to a point where Naughty Dog doesn't put out a game for an entire generation. They have one the generation before and the generation after, but an entire generation goes by when they haven't had a game release. You can't be that in that position. That's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I also sort of feel like after the success of Helldivers 2, not releasing Last of Us Factions seems like that could have been a mistake. That could, Last of Us Factions could have been massive.
Yeah, I think Last of Us Factions was just in a situation where it's like they weren't sure they were going to be able to keep up with the content that people needed, and clearly Helldivers 2 is not having that situation. So
yeah,
I think that's why they made that decision. But I don't think you're wrong. I think people would have welcomed that game.
Yeah, I know people are definitely looking forward to that game. My buddy Joaquin wants to. This is the question that we often get asked and we talk about, but he wants to know, what does the future of Halo look like to you? Like, what do they do with the next one? Is there a next one? Do you reboot, start over? Like, what is the future of Halo?
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you a Halo guy?
I don't care. I don't like Halo.
Are you? Yeah. Are you even a Halo guy?
I really liked Infinite. That was my favorite Halo game.
Really?
Beyond that, I could kind of take or leave a lot of them. But yeah, I really got into Infinite. I enjoyed playing that game whenever friends wanted to play. And then I liked the campaign. Like I was, when I was playing the game and reviewing it, it was like, the campaign's like a 4 out of 5 to me. And I still feel that way. And the online multiplayer is a 5 out of 5. And I still feel that way, despite all the stuff with the content. I'm like, when I play the game, I have a great time, much better time than I have in a lot of other games. So, if that's not going to work, shit, I don't know, man. That's a tough nut to crack to get people to like come back around on that. I would try to like just step back a little bit and kind of look at what Doom did when it like went back to its basics. I think that that Halo mostly did do that with Infinite. But I don't know, try to replicate that a little bit more and with what Doom 2016 did, where it's like really lean into what makes Halo Halo. And at the same time, just kind of be unapologetic about it and have a big attitude about what your game is. And if that means it's sort of diminished in terms of its stature in gaming going forward, oh well, keep putting out Halos because it's important to you. And if you treat it like it's important, people will probably begin to believe it.
Yeah,
I've got a
we
question
always.
for you. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Go on, Rand.
No, go ahead, Jess. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, if we're asking Jeff for his takes on things, and again, speculatively, unless supposed otherwise, I got a rumor here on Twitter right now from Hazardor that suggests Resident Evil 1 remake is in development from Capcom. Have you heard anything about that? And if so, if not, is that something you would like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Resident Evil remake on GameCube is already kind of perfect, and yet I am not even a little bit surprised by that rumor. For one, they are these games make a lot of money for them. They've been very successful. Two, it's like they just did 4. They're probably not ready to go to 5 and 6. So maybe go back and do 1 first, maybe even do a pit stop at Code Veronica, and then do 5 and 6 when it makes a little bit more sense.
Remake.
You know,
would they
a remake of a remake. Yeah, it happens.
Resident Evil 6. You know, the thing is, like, they wouldn't have to remake Resident Evil 6, Jeff. They'd have to make a brand new game because this was kind of.
Yes, it's trash.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. But yeah, listen, that doesn't surprise me. And we've heard that was one of the options for quite some time.
We did have another question in chat regarding Resident Evil. It was kind of rumored that it's going to be revealed soon, and the person was asking, and I forget who it was. I'm sorry. Would it be at the Xbox show or the PlayStation show? And my answer would be the PlayStation show, clearly, because that's where they always are revealed, right? Unless you feel differently.
Well, if it was going to be at one of those shows, it'd be at the PlayStation show. We're talking about a Resident Evil
9
reveal. Yeah. Capcom hasn't announced their own thing, right? Because they've been doing those Resident Evil like directs for the last couple of years, and that I think they would probably just announce it there if they had their choice. But yeah, probably PlayStation.
Yeah. We also have a question here from Lewis Aldridge, who says, "Hey boys, how are y'all this week? It's finally sunny in the UK, so I no longer look like a pale Victorian child ghost. My question is for Jeff, and in regards to if he's heard of any cool specific details relating to Dragon Age Dreadwolf, such as classes or how many companions there will be. Much love to you all."
No, I mean, not really. When I'm doing this reporting, those kinds of details are so in the weeds, and people have their own feelings about these things that it's like, it's never. I remember when I got like a Battlefield 5 rumor or something like that. I had like a full report on it. One of those Battlefields from a long time ago, earlier in my career. And I had a lot of details like that. And it's like people only really cared about the big picture stuff. And a lot of those details would not get anywhere. I mean, maybe that's different these days where it's like there's specific YouTube channels dedicated to these games and these franchises. But I'm not like looking to like get in like, hey, how many guns are in the game and what kind of classes do you have? So instead, it's like, just overall, how's it going? And once the game is here, people then get a chance to see that stuff for themselves. So haven't heard cool specific details since that's what you're asking about. But I'll reiterate that every time I talk to people about the game, everyone seems to be in good spirits about it and seems really happy with it.
Yeah, my concern with that is Dreadwolf's not going to sell, and then they don't get to finish, or they get shut down and they don't make the new Mass Effect game.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're not in that situation.
Or what could be even more hilarious is they do a Mass Effect Andromeda where Dragon Age Dreadwolf doesn't actually finish until you get the DLC, and then the game doesn't sell, and then Dragon Age Dreadwolf remains being unfinished forever, like Mass Effect Andromeda was. But yeah, I don't know. I like just to add to that. I've also heard I got a source who is adamant to me that Dragon Age Dreadwolf is going to be good, and I am so skeptical. And
I know, but my thing is, a lot of the people that work on Dragon Age Dreadwolf, like a lot of the key senior developers, are people who have worked on this series before. But a lot of the other people are the team that sort of rescued Star Wars. What was the MMO?
The Knights of the Old Republic.
It was Star Wars: The Old Republic. A lot of those people that like rescued that MMO and turned it into something that people mostly have generally positive feelings about, and they did like that hard work, and now they're working on this game. And I'm like, okay, that's the kind of labor I can trust in. The people that were able to do that tough job, and now they're coming over here trying to do right by Dragon Age. I'm hopeful.
I actually booked 2 weeks off work to play Star Wars: The Old Republic when it came out. I was for a very brief window in time, I was the most powerful bounty hunter on my server, and everyone would flee in fear of me because I had the best gear and I completely no-lifed it, no sleep. But then there was nothing to do, and I just stopped playing it forever right after that. But, but it is cool that they did turn it around. But yeah, I think that's probably a good time to wrap it up at this point. I think Joaquin's asking really dodgy questions in the chat.
I know.
Well, we are not asking that, Joaquin.
Yeah,
wash your mouth out with soap, young man.
There's one more Patreon question. I wanted to just briefly get to because it's a report that Jeff had made that made me really upset.
Oh no.
And it was about Dead Space 2.
God, that thing.
Yeah, he says if development was halted on Dead Space 2, do you think EA will revisit it in the future, or will it never ever see the light of day? Which is, I was so mad when you said it was, basically not happening. I'm like, no, what do you mean? Dead Space 1 was so incredible. We need the Dead Space 2 remake, please. And then nothing.
So it's like the way that went down was the game was in development, or Dead Space 1 was in development. And while they were doing that, the idea was if they're going to continue doing this, they would take it in a new direction with a Dead Space 2 remake / reimagining / whole new 2 game. And so all that stuff was on the table at that moment, especially before the release of Dead Space 1. And in that moment, in that like window there, as they're finishing up Dead Space 1 and they're thinking about what they're going to do next, one of the options was definitely Dead Space 2. And that was under consideration, and they were never in production on it. Like I said, it was like I said pre-production. And what I meant there was never in full production. But it was one of the things. And then instead of doing that, they put that on the shelf and they got to work on, I forget whatever the fuck they're doing now. But
Battlefield, I think.
Right. God. Yes. Either way, they are probably. It doesn't seem like they're going to revisit that. The reason I was given, which has not been, countered by anyone, is the sales of that game were not justified. Like right away, they weren't justifying them really putting that much more into Dead Space, I guess, which is a real shame. And I feel like that's a short-sighted decision as well, where it's like, had they kept investing in Dead Space, it would have had a Resident Evil-like trajectory. Maybe it never gets to Resident Evil's heights, but as people have more games to play, they go back to those games over and over again, and then they start getting excited for the next one, because that's just how horror games fans are. They want a long series with a lot of lore, and they want to like have a lot of payoff and know there's a ton there, and that's why each Resident Evil game is bigger than the last one. So yeah, short-sighted, but I wouldn't get your hopes up for them to return to that.
No, because it's like Dead Space and Dead Space 2 are both amazing. And some days I think Dead Space 1's better, and other days I think Dead Space 2 is better. And it just hurts me that we're not going to see Dead Space 2 remade. Because the first one was just so incredible. And it's just like, oh, God damn it.
Yep, I'm sorry, but yeah, that seems to be the way it went.
Yeah. We have I get a comment, but we'll get you out on here on this. I don't even know if it's a question. He says, we'll throw this in chat before you leave just because all three of you are here. I listened to a lot of the Game Mess and Xbox 2 since the pandemic in 2020. Graduated medical school this year, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the content y'all put out over the last 4 years. Podcasts were integral in letting me connect to the hobby during flash sessions, long commutes to work, and overnight shifts. Appreciate y'all. Well, thank you. That means a lot.
That's really nice.
Yeah. And with that, Jeff, we'll get you out of here.
Thanks, boys. That was a good time.
For coming on and talking about everything in the industry going on for the 2 hours or so. Obviously, I think everyone knows who you are and where you are, but if they don't, if anybody here is listening, where can they check out your lovely Nintendo podcast and your Giant Bomb work?
You know what they could do for me? We have a live show on June 9th in Los Angeles that we're doing alongside the Summer Game Fest. It's going to be at the Bellwether in Los Angeles. Ooh. And it's going to be night 3 of our GB at Night, our Giant Bomb at Night show. And we're going to have special guests. Let's see. We're going to have a very special guest related to Xbox on that show, which is what I'll say at this moment.
Okay.
And you want to be there. It's going to be a good time. Tickets are on sale now. You could find out the link. It's on giantbomb.com, or if you go to twitter.com/giantbomb, I think it's in our pinned tweet there. Buy tickets. Come to that show. It's going to be a really good time. We're also going to have like friends and cool people hanging out with us. So definitely come hang out. That'd be great.
Yeah, you put on an amazing show.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Last year's show was fantastic. I think I watched like pretty much all of it.
Thank you.
Always get a rotating guests come in.
And we'll have that as well. That'll be the first 2 nights. We'll have that typical couch like normal, and then night 3 will be a live show where we kind of like minimize that show into something for a live audience.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. I'll definitely be watching.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in for this Xbox 2+1. We'll be back on Friday, or at least I will, because Jez is going to visit a studio. So I will be doing something with probably some friends, and we'll see you on Friday. So with that, we will love you, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks so much, Jeff. If you want to check out Jeff's stuff, all Jeff's links are in the description, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.